As Richard Engel reported for NBC News tonight, Ukraine's president is urging the rest of the world to ban Russia's main export, fossil fuel. And as oil and gas prices soar in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, there has been a push here to explore other opportunities for energy imports. There are reports that President Joe Biden is considering a trip to Saudi Arabia to convince them to produce more oil. Also talks of a new Iran deal to normalize relations with that oil-rich country. And over the weekend, administration officials visited Venezuela, a Russian ally with massive petroleum resources, to possibly reduce sanctions on its oil exports. Now, if all this sounds familiar, it is because it is. The United States, and much of the world, in fact, has been relying on a coalition of often rogue petrostates to fuel our need for oil production for decades. Even as every U.S. president from both parties since Richard Nixon has been calling for us to reduce our reliance on foreign energy. Back in the early 1970s, then President Nixon lifted caps on oil imports into the United States. He did this because our domestic supply struggled to meet the demand of the post-World War II boom. And just as he did that, OPEC, which was then the newly formed Middle East oil cartel, embargoed oil imports to the U.S. and other countries over their support for Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. The embargo was massively disruptive to American life, cars waiting in long lines during the gas shortage, gas stations forced to ration sales, proving for the first time just how dangerous our reliance on foreign energy could be. Nearly 50 years ago, in the middle of that embargo, Nixon pledged to end our reliance on foreign oil.
We as a nation must now set upon a new course. We must develop new sources of energy, which will give us the capacity to meet our needs without relying on any foreign nation.
Just a few years later, in 1976, Jimmy Carter was elected president. In one of his first addresses to the American public, he called for reduction in energy consumption, only for another energy crisis to pop up 2 years later, the Iranian Revolution in 1979, leading again to long gas lines and rations. That same year, Carter installed solar panels at the White House, wisely noting that renewable energy would not only be better for the environment, it would also reduce the influence of oil-rich countries in the Middle East and elsewhere.
Solar energy will not pollute our air or water. We will not run short of it. No one can ever embargo the sun or interrupt its delivery to us.
He was right nearly 50 years ago, even if the solar panels were mostly symbolic. But for a moment, it really looked like the U.S. was going to combat the oil shocks in the 1970s with huge investments in renewable energy. But then the following year, President Ronald Reagan had different plans.
America must get to work producing more energy. Large amounts of oil and natural gas lay beneath our land and off our shores untouched because the present administration seems to believe the American people would rather see more regulation, more taxes, and more controls than more energy.
Once he took office, Reagan quietly removed the solar panels from the White House, even as he, too, called for reduced reliance on foreign energy. And from that point onwards, it was a similar holding pattern for every president, starting with President George H.W. Bush when the Gulf War started, all the way to Donald Trump.
There is no security for the United States in further dependence on foreign oil.
This will reduce our demand for foreign oil.
And that's what I want to talk to you all about today. A strategy to make us less dependent on foreign sources of energy.
Each day, we send nearly $1 billion of our wealth to foreign countries for their oil.
We are independent, and we do not need Middle East oil.
Of course, that last one was false. Now, it's the same story for nearly 50 years, and I'm going to talk to one senator who just spoke to Ukrainian President Zelensky about how the U.S. can finally break that cycle of reliance on foreign oil, including from Russia. Next.